Hi everybody, Jean here with another program provided to you by the Pamunkey Regional Library. I'm here today at the Cochran-Rockville branch and we are going to be learning how to do count and cross stitch. Yay! Our project is going to be this cute little penguin with scarf and hat all ready for winter. So for those of you who have done cross stitch in the past, count and cross stitch is not much different. The main difference being that there is no actual pattern printed on the material. If you happen to live in the Rockville area, while supplies last, we have a few of these project kits already made up, and they have everything in there that you would need to complete this project. So stop by, pick one up, and then you can follow along with the video to complete your project. Supplies that you're going to be needing are a piece of Aida cloth. Aida cloth is the name of the cloth used for count and cross stitch. It's probably difficult to see, but if I hold it up close, you can see that there are little perforations in the fabric, and that is where you'll be placing your stitches. This particular one is a size 14 count. The count number comes from how many squares there are per inch. The smaller the number, the smaller the number, the larger the square. So 14 count is a good size to start with. It also comes in 18, 22, 11, that sort of thing. A pin to mark your center spot is helpful. You're going to need an embroidery needle. This one is, I believe, a size 24, but a size 24 or 26 is a good size. Need a pair of scissors, an embroidery hoop, of course your pattern, and then let's see, your threads. This is a whole pack of threads, and they come all different ways. These just happen to come in little bobbin-like holders, which is nice. Then for some things that you don't necessarily need but would be very helpful are little threaders. So you stick these, it helps you just thread your needle a little bit easier with the embroidery thread. This is called a stitch minder, and it's very helpful for you to keep track of what row you're on when you're counting your stitches. So it has these little, it's metal, and it has these little magnets that you can, first of all, holds down your pattern, but also you can slide these up and down to make sure which row, keep track of which row you're actually on. And lastly, I like to use some kind of magnification device that helps me see the holes in the fabric a little bit better. So this is just a pair of clip-on magnifying glasses. If you wear glasses, you can clip these right on your glasses. If you don't wear glasses, this is another magnifying device that you put this up on your, rest this on your chest, put this around your neck, and then you look down into the magnifying glass. So both of those are really helpful. So when trying to figure out which size piece of Aida cloth you need to get, there's a simple mathematical equation actually you can use. You can take the finished size of the design, which is the stitch count, and divide it by the cloth size. So in this particular case, I've marked off our stitches, I've counted them. It's actually 40 stitches long by 30 stitches wide. So if you take the 40 stitches, 40, divided by 14, which is the size Aida cloth that we're using, you get 2.9, which is how big, what the size will be in inches. So that just kind of like lets you know how big, just from looking at this, how big your finished project is going to be. So today, our finished project is going to be just shy of 3 inches. Okay? So you want to get a piece of Aida cloth that is at least big enough for your project. Ours is going to be about approximately 3 inches. And then you want to go ahead and leave about 3 inches on all the sides, just so that you have enough room to be able to fit your cloth in onto your embroidered hoop, and also depending on how you want to finish it, if you want to frame it later or make a little pillow out of it or something, you're going to want enough blank cloth around the edges. So the first thing you want to do is take your pattern and you want to determine where the center of your pattern is. Down the vertical side, I have about approximately 47 stitches and approximately 30 going across. So you want to find the halfway points of both those intersections, and then you want to take a ruler and a pencil, and you can make a line going up and over. And then where those two lines intersect is where the center of your pattern is going to be. And as you can see, I made a little black dot where the center actually is. So that's the first thing you want to do. Then you want to get your material, and we're going to place it in the hoop. Before we place it in the hoop, we're going to fold it in half, make a little crease, and fold it in half the other way, make a little crease. And then approximately where those two intersect, you're going to put your pin. And that's just to mark your spot so that once you pull it, the fabric taut in between your hoop, it doesn't disappear and you don't forget where it is. Okay, so then we're going to put your material in your hoop. So you put one over the little hoop and one over, and you might have to loosen this up a bit. Here we go. And you got to push it on. And as you can see, that makes your material nice and tight. Makes it easier to work with, like a little drum. You might have to tighten that up a little bit. And there you go. You're all ready to start with your material. I'm going to take my pattern, and I'm going to, as I said before, use this to hold down my pattern. And I'm going to use this little one as my stitch minder. So I'm going to put that right under. We're going to be starting right on his beak here. So I'm going to put that right there so that it keeps track of where I am on my beak. And next, we're going to thread our needle. So as you can see, the beak is orange. So we're going to start with some orange thread. And embroidery thread always comes, doesn't look like it, but it always comes with 6 strands in each piece of thread. Typically, when you're doing counter cross stitch, you're always using just 2 of those threads. So that means out of this one piece of thread, you're going to have at least 3 different groups of threadings that you're going to use. So I'm going to separate this. This looks like it already is 2. Okay, so you would separate just to make sure you have 2 threads, which this is. And then I'm going to thread my needle. And like I said, this is an easy way to do this. You just stick this little piece of wire in your eye of your needle, put the thread in like this, pull it through a little bit, and then when you pull that through, it threads nice and easily. Okay. So we have our pattern ready to go, we have our material ready to go, and we have our thread ready to go. I need to explain a little bit about the kind of stitches we're going to be making. Obviously, they're cross stitches, which mean you make a little X. So on the Aida cloth, the Aida cloth has all across it little perforations. And inside each of those perforations If you connect all 4 of them, it's a square. So basically what we're going to be doing is making stitches one way and then making stitches the other way to create an X. Typically, the best way to do it is to have all the stitches go left to right in one direction, and then the second stitch over top to go right to left. And then you'll finish up with that little X. You always want to make sure your stitches are always gone the same way. Otherwise, it won't be a nice finished project. In counting cross stitch, you never make a knot in the thread. If you made a knot in the thread, the knot would create like a bump if you went to finish this off with a, in a picture frame or something like that. So you don't want anything that would raise up the fabric to create like a little lump underneath. So you never always keep in mind you never make a knot. Make sure you keep a long enough tail that you don't lose it and you'll have to rethread your needle again. Okay, so now we're just going to get started. If you remember, this was our going to be our beginning stitch, which on our pattern, it corresponds to the little black dot. So I'm going to slide this out. You can kind of wiggle it around just so that you see, make a little hole where you know you're going to come up. And you come up through the back, and you're going to pull through and leave a little bit of a tail back there. You see that? Hold that down with your fingers. Now, I'm making this little stitch here with the black dot. So, first we're going to make our first stitch, which is left to right. And then we're going to come up in the other little hole. Sometimes it's hard to find it. And you're going to go down, and that is our finished X, as you can see. Okay, so I've just done this stitch. Now I'm going to do these 3 stitches above it, and they're centered over this one stitch. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to do 3 stitches, and this is where obviously you count. So I'm just going to go in the same direction. So that's 1, 2, 3. And when I finish the row, I'm going to start back with the stitches going the other way to complete the X. Now you can certainly complete each X as you go. I always find it's just easier just to do it by row. Okay. So now we have this stitch and these 3 stitches. So I'm going to move that up. And now I'm going to do 5 stitches centered over these 3 stitches. So you just come out 1 from above. You're basically just adding 1 onto each end. Now while you're stitching, if you happen to get a knot in your thread, like that, boy, I just jinxed myself, you can usually just pull it, gently pull it right back out. You want to try to avoid getting knots at all costs, like I said before, because of you don't want the bumps behind your fabric. Okay, I'm finishing up my last in this row. And now I'm going to start back to complete the X's. kind of using my finger behind the material to guide my needle underneath to know where I have to come up. It's kind of like you can just kind of feel where it is, where it needs to go. Okay, so now I've finished my beak. Very quick. He's all done. All right, so once you finish one area and you want to move on to another area, the best way to do it, again, you don't want to make a knot, so you just take your thread and your needle, and you're going to go under a couple stitches. And then you pull it through and you cut it off. Don't cut it too close because you don't want to lose you don't want to, have that pull back through. And I like to, as I'm going, keep my stitches neat so that at the end you don't have a lot of cleaning up to do. But there you go, the beak is done. So where you go from there is purely, up to you, what you think is easiest. I think what I'm going to do is do his eyes next because it's kind of close and I don't have to count very far away. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my black. And this strand has all 6 threads, so I'm going to separate 2. You kind of have to be a little careful when you do this so that you don't knot it all up. And I'm going to take my 2 and I'll thread it the same way I did before. I can see, there we go. Okay. So now, you want to kind of play off of this last row of your orange stitches, and we're going to do this row of black right here. So basically, you have your last stitch here. You're going to come up 1, 2, and over 1. So I'm going to go to my last stitch. I'm going to count up 2. 1, 2. So it's up 2, and when you go over 1, that's where the black should go. So I'm going to leave a little tail again. And so that's that stitch. Now we're going to do one beside it, so there's only going to be 2 here. Okay, so we did those 2. Now we're just going to do 2 right above it. Now what you have to watch out for is when you do a stitch right above the one that you just did, if you go in the same hole, you just have to remember, if you go in the same hole, it's going to undo your stitch you just did. So sometimes you may have to do the stitch beside it so that you're not actually going in and out of the same hole. Otherwise, it'll just come right back out. Okay, so there's one of his eyes. Now, you can do this too. There's all different ways that you can do counting. It's whichever one is easiest for you. You can do the same thing here. You can go up 2 and go over 1 to find this eye, or I find it easier just to go when you have a chance to just go straight across. So from this bottom one, this bottom row of black, we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in the 6th square, we're going to do our next stitch. So we're going to count over. There's 3, 4, 5, and then let's see if this is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, this is 6. So we're going to do 2 there. Come back, complete the X. Now this is what I was telling you about. I just finished my stitch there. So if I come up in that hole to attempt to do a left to right stitch, it's just going to make that stitch come right back out again. So I'm just going to skip and do this one. And then come back over and do this one. Okay, so there we have both his little eyes. Now, when you're working with thread, especially dark thread, you don't want to travel too far behind to get to another spot. In this case, if we wanted to go to this little, his little widow's peak, which is probably what I would do next, I think that's okay because we're only going a short distance. But you would never want to go from here down to here and carry the thread across like this, because what's going to happen is, I don't know if you can see that, but you kind of can see the thread through that carried thread, especially if it's going across blank fabric. So in that case, you would want to, end it here and then just start again at the bottom. But we're going to go ahead and do this little widow's peak. So the widow's peak, as you can see, is the next row up from the top part of his eyes and over about 2 stitches. So it's the very next row up, but 2 stitches over. Okay, so we just completed that stitch. Now we're going to do 3 above it, so that's kind of centered. Sometimes I have a hard time finding where to bring the needle up. Okay, so we completed the little peak part. Now we're going to go up and do this long line for like his little forehead, I guess. Basically, what I would do here, probably the easiest thing to do here, would be to just count across 4 here and do these 2 stitches. And then we can go up and do these and go down. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's whatever is easiest for you. You could certainly just go straight up and do 3 and then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. But, whatever works for you. So I'm going to go across. I'm going to count 4 across from my last stitch. So that's 2, 3, 4. So you leave 4 empty, and then I'm going to do those 2. Okay, so I did those 2. Now, on the right-hand side one, I'm going to go up and then go over. And it's a good idea to count these stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I'm going to go above it's hard, I'm looking upside down here. I'm going to go above the one to the right. Oops, brought that one out. And then we're just going to go across till you have 13 stitches. If you see your thread curling up like this, every now and then it's a good idea to let it hang down and unwind a little bit, and that'll help you prevent from getting knots. The thing I really like about counted cross stitch as opposed to regular cross stitch is that I like the idea that you actually see your image appear. It's not there, and all of a sudden it's just appearing, and it's just very satisfying to me. Okay, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so I got my 13 stitches. I'm just going to go back and finish off the X's. Okay, so now we've completed this line, and here's where, I know it sounds like it may be tedious, counting stitches all the time, counting stitches, but you don't actually, I had to count this line to make sure there were 13 there. But this line you don't have to actually count, you just have to go into. So you're not actually counting every stitch, sometimes it's just like a relative thing. You see that this has, that was 13, this is, you don't have to count these because you just see you have to go into from each side. So I'm going to skip 2 and start the next row. And then you're going to go to, you're going to stop 2 in from the other side. So we're 2 from the end. Start back the other way. So you can see we've completed this little part of his forehead up here. What I'm going to do next is start working down and complete both these little areas here. So I'm going to complete that, and then we'll come back and we'll probably start his scarf. So I finished up the little face area, I guess you could say, since we were last on. And now I think what we're going to do is work on this little light green part of his hat. So I've already got my needle threaded up, and I think I'm going to start down here and work my way up and over in this direction. So I'm going to start my first stitch by this black 3, group of 3 right there. So I'm going to come up right to the left of that group of 3, pull my tail in, and do one stitch right there. And because there's only one here, I'm just going to finish this stitch. I can find the hole. Because basically it's its own row. Okay, the next one up is going to be 2 right above that. Now I can't, obviously, I went in, just entered into this hole, so I can't come up through that hole, so I'm going to just start up in the upper right-hand corner of that X and go down instead of from down to up. It's the same thing as long as your stitch is going in the right direction. And then I'm going to do 2 right here. Okay, so now I've done these 3 stitches right here. The next one up, is going to be 3 stitches. So we did 1, we did 2, we did 3, and as you can see, they're all lined up here. The only way that they are different is going over towards the right there. So again, have to start in that upper right-hand corner so that I don't take my stitch back out. And I'm going to do those 3. Okay, so you get the idea. I'm going to continue like that all the way across to the other side, and when I'm done, I'll come back. So I'm finishing up the last of the brim. I'm going to turn it over, run it through a couple of my stitches at the back. Pull it through and snip it off. All right, so we are ready to start the actual part of his hat, the dark green part. And what I plan to do is work it exactly kind of the same way we did this one. I'm going to start over here and just work my way over, do one whole row, kind of going around this brim of his hat, and then work the rest of that dark green up. So, I'm going to get my thread going. Again, you want to take out 2 strands. There's always 6. There we go. All right, thread the needle. And I'm going to start right next to this. You can see there's 4 light green stitches here. So that's where I'm going to start my first stitch, which is right there. Okay, so I've completed this stitch. Now I'm going to do 3 right above that. Not. Okay, so I did those 3. Now I'm going to come in 1 and do another 3. So come in 1 from that and go over 3. Okay, so now I'm right at this point right here. Actually, this point right here. Now we're going to start right above this first three here, go all the way across, and you don't have to count because what you can do is just look and see that this will go 3 stitches beyond this last green stitch. So you don't have to, tediously count all these. You just know that you're going straight up from here and over 3 from this last green stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to finish up his hat, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the pom-pom. So I'm finishing up the last of the brim. I'm going to turn it over, run it through a couple of my stitches at the back. Pull through and snip it off. All right, so we are ready to start the actual part of his hat, the dark green part. And what I plan to do is work it exactly kind of the same way we did this one. I'm going to start over here and just work my way over, do one whole row, kind of going around this brim of his hat, and then work the rest of that dark green up. So, I'm going to get my thread going. Again, you want to take out 2 strands. There's always 6. A little knot. There we go. All right. Thread my needle. And I'm going to start right next to this. You can see there's 4 light green stitches here. So that's where I'm going to start my first stitch, which is right there. Okay, so I've completed this stitch. Now I'm going to do 3 right above that. Knot. Okay, so I did those 3. Now I'm going to come in 1 and do another 3. So come in 1 for that, and go over 3. Okay, so now I'm right at this point right here. Actually, this point right here. Now we're going to start right above this first 3 here, go all the way across, and you don't have to count because what you can do is just look and see that this will go 3 stitches beyond this last green stitch. So you don't have to, tediously count all these. You just know that you're going straight up from here and over 3 from this last green stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to finish up his hat, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the pom-pom. Okay, so I'm just finishing up the main part of his hat. I have 2 more stitches to go, and then we're going to start on the pom-pom, and then his hat will be complete. All right, last stitch. Bring it through to the back. Oops. through a couple stitches there. All right. I'm going to clean up a couple of my threads while I'm here. It's good to do that while you're going along, just keeps it neat. You don't have to do it all at the end. All right, so the pom-pom. I'm going to thread my light green again. Okay. And the light green pom-pom is just a little bit off to the side of the top of the hat, so it's going to be above the right stitch of this last two greens up here. So that's where we're going to start. So we're just going to go right above that last green stitch to the right. And you're going to go over 2 stitches. Okay. Now we're going to center 4 stitches above those 2 stitches. So basically that just means coming over one to this one and ending one over past the other second stitch. So we're going to continue in this manner. We're going to do another 4 right above this 4, and then end with a 2, and the pom-pom will be complete. And then after the pom-pom, I think we're going to come down and start working on his scarf. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up that pom-pom, and we'll be back to do the scarf. There. So next we're going to start working on his scarf. And I'm going to take my little line minder, and we're going to travel down here to the last black of his face, his cheek, and we're going to start with the scarf. And what I plan to do for this is just to work down till we get to this line, and then I'll work across, finish up over here, and then come down for the little tails of his scarf. That's the plan. So we're going to start with this first row of 3, and it's right under this last 2 of his cheek. So line this one up right directly under that black stitch. Do 3. Okay, so for the next one, you can slide your stitch finder down. We're going to do 4. This one lines up and this one goes in. So again, you don't really have to count. You just have to look at the stitches relative to each other. Again, you don't have to, there's no right or wrong way to do this. However it makes the most sense to you, however it is easier for you, that's the way to do it. So I'm finishing up this row of 4, and we're going to keep moving down. You can see that this continues to go flush with the stitch above it, and then this next row is going to be 2 further into the right. And then we're just going to keep moving down, like I said, till we get to this row, move all the way across, go work up to here, and then down for his scarf. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that, and we'll come back when I'm done. So we finished his scarf, and the next thing we're going to work on is his body, which is pretty much the end, because after that, all we have left are the feet. So we're going to approach the body the same way pretty much that we did the scarf. I'm going to start up here with this single stitch by the scarf, and we're just going to work our way down till we get to this area, and then we can work our way back up. So I'm going to start with this first stitch, and it's under this third. You can do it a couple ways. You can either do it on the last row of stitches here, or you can do it under the 3 green stitches here. So I'm just going to go under the 3. And then we have 3 right underneath of it. Okay, and then we're just going to keep working our way down through to his flipper, around his belly, and around to the other flipper. And then we'll come back. So I finished up his body, the black of his body, and I also did one of his feet. What I want to really talk to you about right now is mistakes. So if you make a mistake while you're doing counter cross stitch and you catch it in time, obviously you can undo it. You can undo a couple of stitches. It's not a big deal. It takes a little bit of time, but usually it's worth it. Or if you don't think it looks that bad, you can just leave it go. I made a mistake right here, and I'm sure you can see it. On this side of his body, I had a misplaced stitch. And I didn't realize I had done it until I was fairly far along. So what I decided to do, I just made another stitch over on this side to duplicate it, so it kind of makes it look purposeful. And I don't think it looks that bad, so I'm fine with it. I'm going to let it go. Anyways, we're going to start now with the other foot. So for the feet, we're just going to start the first stitch right up there on the far right hand side of this second to the last row of black. So actually the third to the last row of black. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start up here and do one stitch. I purposely left some of these stitches in the back so you can see how I clean them up. I'm going to finish up with securing my last thread. And then I'm going to just clean up some of these stitches. So there he is. The penguin's complete. Good job. He looks really good. once you're done your project, the first thing you want to do is take your counter cross stitch out of your hoop, and as you can see, it's created a little divot just because we've been working on it for quite a while. And typically what you want to do with this, the best thing to do is to get out your ironing board, turn him over like this. I usually spray lightly a little mist of water over top of it to help the ironing process, and then just iron this nice and flat. And there's a couple different ways that you can finish this. If you're a sewer, you can cut this out and make this the top part of a pillow. That would be really cute. You can frame him like I did. I framed this one under glass. Typically, traditionally, I guess I should say, most counter cross stitches are not framed under glass because you want to see the stitches really nice and clear. So they sell things like this self-stick board, and you peel off the whole top part of the board. You would press this over top and wrap it around and then frame it like that without glass. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed learning how to count and cross stitch. Have a happy holidays, and I'll see you next time.